Hello everyone, it's Mom Steph right here and welcome once again to my YouTube channel. If you are new to my channel, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell down below so you will be updated to my future tutorials. For this video, we are going to continue the discussion on solving quadratic equations. But this time, we are going to discuss the third method of solving quadratic equations, which is completing the square. So let's start. So solving quadratic equations by completing the square. This is now the third method that we're going to discuss. So let's first have a review of what are perfect square trinomials. So perfect square trinomials are polynomials or quadratics with three terms which follows this pattern. So we have the first term, x squared, which is a perfect square, plus or minus 2xy plus y squared. This means that the third term should always be positive, unlike the second term, which can be positive or negative. And if we're going to factor this trinomial, the factors would be x plus or minus y quantity squared. This means that this x right here is the square root of the first term, or the x here. And this y in the second term of the factor is the square root of the third term, or the y in the second term, and then raised to the second power. So itong positive and negative, this also means that it will follow whatever the sign of the second term. So example of a perfect square trinomial is we have x squared plus 4x plus 4. So let's test if this is a perfect square trinomial. Does it follow this pattern? So of course, for the x squared, obviously, this is a perfect square. So we have this one right here. And then for the third term, 4 is also a perfect square, which can be written as 2 squared. So this 2 represents y in the pattern. And let's try to see xy. So xy is the square root of x, which is x. So let's put x here. So that's x. And then times y. Ito. So ang y natin is itong number 2 dito. So times 2. Okay? And then since plus, so we will put plus right here, times 2. Okay, so for the first term, check, pasok for a perfect square trinomial. For the third term, pasok rin for a perfect square trinomial. And then let's test the middle term if it follows the pattern of a perfect square trinomial. So ito, this is 2, and that is x. And let's see if this is 4x. So 2 times 2, that would be 4 times x, that's 4x. So therefore, this right here confirms that x squared plus 4x plus 4 is a perfect square trinomial. The next example is we have 4x squared minus 20x plus 25. So to rewrite that and to check if this is a perfect square trinomial, we need to rewrite 4x squared into 2x squared. Because obviously, 4x squared is a perfect square. And then, for the third term, we have 25. So obviously, 25 is also a perfect square, which can be written into 5 squared. And then let's try to see if we can get negative 20x. So we have negative 2. Okay, we follow this pattern. Times the square root of the first term, which is 2x. Times the square root of the third term, which is 5. So we have 2 times 2, that will be 4, times 5, that is 20. And times x, that is negative 20x. So this one right here confirms that this trinomial is a perfect square trinomial. So for solving quadratic equations by completing the square, this method is applicable for quadratic equations that are not factorable and that are not perfect square. So these quadratic equations can be binomial. It can also be in the form of a trinomial quadratic equation. Next, our goal for this method is to create a perfect square trinomial out of the given quadratic equation and by following these steps. So to follow the steps, let's try to solve 3x squared minus 12x minus 36 equals 0 by completing the square. So step 1 is to set the quadratic equation in standard form. And since our quadratic equation is already in standard form, we will proceed to step 2, which is to divide both sides of our equation by the coefficient a and then simplify. So in this equation, our coefficient a is 3. Therefore, we will divide this side with 3 and the other side also with 3. And this means that we are going to divide each of these coefficients with 3. So 3 divided by 3, that is 1. Therefore, we are left with x squared. And negative 12 divided by 3, that will be negative 4. And so our linear term will now become negative 4x. And negative 36 divided by 3 is negative 12. And of course, 0 divided by 3 will still be 0. Therefore, our resulting equation after dividing both sides with 3 is x squared minus 4x minus 12 equals 0. Step 3 is to group the terms such that the terms with variables are on the left side of the equation and the constant term is on the right side of our equation. So, we have this resulting equation. We just transferred negative 12 as our constant to the other side of the equation, so it becomes positive 12. And what is left on this side is x squared minus 4x. Then for step 4, we are going to add b over 2 quantity squared on both sides of the resulting equation. Now this time, let's identify the third term that is needed to make this side a perfect square trinomial. So, gagamitin lang natin itong formula na to, b over 2 quantity squared. That will be equal to, yung b natin is negative 4. Therefore, we have negative 4 divided by 2 quantity, so we have squared. And then, the result of that is negative 4 divided by 2, that will be negative 2 squared. And then we have negative 2 squared, that will be positive 4. Kaya, what we will be adding to this side of our equation will be positive 4 and to the other side as well. So, ang resulting equation will be x squared minus 4x plus 4 equals 12 plus 4. And then take note that after adding, the left side of the equation becomes a perfect square trinomial, which is itong x squared minus 4x plus 4. Kaya, after nito is we will now factor this perfect square trinomial. And the factor of that is x minus 2 quantity squared. And then equals 16. Ito yung 12 plus 4 dito na side. Then the next step is to solve the resulting quadratic equation by extracting the square roots. So, by extracting the square root, this means that we are going to get the square root of both sides of our equation. And then, ang ibig sabihin lang nito is mawawala ang ating exponent na 2. Therefore, on this side of the equation, we are left with x minus 2 and the square root of 16 is positive and negative 4. And then for our sixth step is to solve the resulting linear equation. So, ang linear equation natin ay ito na. And to solve for the value of x, we will just transfer negative 2 to the other side of our equation and the resulting will be x equals positive and negative 4 plus 2. Now this time, we obtain two equations. The first equation will give us the first root, which is positive 4 plus 2. Dito yon galing. Sa positive 4 plus 2. And our second equation will give us our second root, which is negative 4 plus 2, considering the negative sign here. Therefore, our roots are 6, and the other one is negative 2. And the last step is to make sure that these obtained values of x are really the solutions of our original equation. Therefore, we do checking. So to check, balikan natin ang ating mga na-obtained na mga values of x, which is x equals negative 2 and x equals 6. And ang gagawin lang natin is we will just substitute these two values with our original equation, that is 3x squared minus 12x minus 36 equals 0. So for the first value, which is x equals negative 2, we will substitute negative 2 to the variable x. So ganito ang mangyayari. And then we have negative 2 squared, that will become 4. And then simplify lang natin further. So we have 12, that is 3 times 4. And the negative 12 times 2, that becomes positive 24. And then just copy 36 equals 0. And then we have 36 minus 36, that is 0 equals 0. And this is true. So this means that this is a solution of our original equation. Now let's proceed to the other one. So again, just substitute the value of x. And then we have 6 squared, that becomes 36. Then simplify it further. 36 times 3 is 108, and negative 12 times 6, that's negative 72, and then copy 36 equal to 0. And then that becomes 36 minus 36, which is also 0 equals 0. And once again, this is true. Kaya ito rin ay isa sa mga solutions ng ating quadratic equation. Therefore, now we can conclude that the roots of 3x squared minus 12x minus 36 equals 0 are the values negative 2 and positive 6. Now, the next example is to solve x squared plus 10 equals 6x by completing the square. So observe that our quadratic equation has coefficient a which is only equal to 1, unlike our first example. So set the quadratic equation in standard form. Kaya, yung standard form natin ay x squared minus 6x plus 10 equals 0. So we just transferred 6x to the other side of our equation, and that becomes negative 6x. Second step is to divide both sides of the equation by the coefficient a and then simplify. So since our coefficient a is only 1, therefore it doesn't make any changes. Kaya, we will then proceed to step 3. And that is to group the terms such that the terms with variables are on the left side of the equation. So, ihihiwalay natin yung mga may variables na x dun sa ating constant. Kaya, we will just transfer positive 10 to the other side of our equation. And the resulting equation will be x squared minus 6x equals negative 10. Now, this time, we will add the quantity b over 2 squared on both sides of our resulting equation para maging perfect square trinomial ang side na to. So to do that, we will be using the formula b over 2 squared equals, this time, the value of b is negative 6 over 2 squared. Negative 6 divided by 2, that becomes negative 3, and then squared. And so, we have negative 3 squared, that is 9. Therefore, the third term na kailangan nating i-add para maging perfect square trinomial ang expression na to is positive 9. And since we added positive 9 to this side, we will also add positive 9 to the other side of our equation to balance our equation. And now take note that we already have a perfect square trinomial on this side. And so, we will be factoring this side, and to simplify this side, the resulting equation will be x minus 3 quantity squared equals negative 1. Galing yan sa negative 10 plus 9. And the next step is to solve the resulting quadratic equation by extracting the square root. Alam na natin yan, that we are going to get the square root of both sides of our equation. And so this means that our exponent 2 will disappear. So we will be left with x minus 3 on this side. And alam naman natin that there is no square root of a negative number. Kaya naman, the result will be an imaginary number. So if ganito yung mangyayari, we don't need to proceed to step 6 and step 7 kasi wala naman tayong makukuhang real number. Kaya we will now proceed to our conclusion that the quadratic equation x squared plus 10 equals 6x has no real roots or solutions. So now, our third example is to solve x squared plus 14x equals 0 by completing the square. So step 1 is to set the quadratic equation in standard form. Now, observe that our quadratic equation here only has two terms, the quadratic term and the linear term. Therefore, wala tayong constant term. So ito na yung magiging standard form niya. And so, number 2 is to divide both sides again by the coefficient a. So, dito, wala na tayong i-divide kasi 1 lang yung coefficient and it doesn't make any difference. The third step is to group the terms with variables x. So, wala naman tayong constant, therefore, hindi na rin natin magagawa yung step 3. So, dito na tayo magsisimula sa step 4, which is to identify the third term na pwede nating i-add sa ating equation para maging perfect square trinomial ang side na to. Ang gagawin lang natin is to again use the formula b over 2 squared. So, yung b natin is obviously positive 14. So, we have 14 divided by 2 and then squared. And the result of 14 divided by 2 is 7 squared. 7 squared is 49. Kaya naman, we will add 49 to both sides of our equation. And so the resulting equation is x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals 0 plus 49. And then take note that this side is already a perfect square trinomial. So to factor that, we have x plus 7 squared equals 49. So solve the resulting quadratic equation again by extracting the square root. That means getting the square root of both sides. So mawawala ang ating exponent at ang square root. So the resulting equation will be x plus 7 equals positive and negative 7. And the next step is to solve the resulting linear equation. Therefore, to solve for the value of x, we will just transfer positive 7 to the other side. That becomes x equals positive and negative 7 minus 7. And this means we obtained two equations. The first one is positive 7 minus 7, and the other one is negative 7 minus 7. So our first root is equal to 0. The second root is negative 14. So let's proceed to the seventh step, which is to check our obtained values of x. So again, sa checking, we have x equals 0, and the other one is x equals negative 14. And substitute that to our original equation, x squared plus 14, x equals 0. 0 squared plus 14 times 0 equals 0. Obviously, that is 0 plus 0. 0 equals 0. This means that this is true. Kaya 0 is one of our solution. And then, let's proceed to the next one. So, substitute, we have negative 14 squared and positive 14 times negative 14. That is 196 minus 196, and that is still 0 equals 0, which is also true. Therefore, our conclusion is that the roots of x squared plus 14x equals 0 are the values 0 and negative 14. So our last example will be to solve 2x squared minus 3x plus 4 equals 0 by completing the square. And first step is again to set our quadratic equation in standard form. And since this is already in standard form, let's proceed to the second one, which is to divide both sides of the quadratic equation by the coefficient a. And this time, yung value ng a natin is 2. So ang mangyayari dito is again, we divide this side with 2 and this side with also 2. So i-divide lang natin each coefficient with this number. So we have 2 divided by 2, negative 3 divided by 2, and positive 4 divided by 2. At saka 0 divided by 2, which is still 0. And so the resulting equation will be x squared minus 3 over 2x plus 2. So ang nangyari sa middle term is since hindi naman divisible ang 3 sa 2, kaya we'll leave it this way, na naka-fraction form. So that is now our resulting equation. Then the third one is to separate the constant term with those with the variables x. So the resulting equation is x squared minus 3 over 2x equals 0 minus 2. So we just transferred positive 2 to the other side. And then this time, we are going to add b over 2 squared. So medyo complicated to kasi fraction yung b natin. So here's what you're going to do. Okay, so we have b over 2 squared. And we know that our value of b is negative 3 over 2. That is over 2 again. Itong 2 dito. And then quantity squared. Okay, so medyo complicated, no? So take note that we can rewrite this into this manner. So we have, in the numerator, 3 over 2. And yung 2 na denominator is pwede din natin i-rewrite into 2 over 1. Kasi any whole number can be expressed into fraction form with denominator na 1. And then wag nating kalimutan yung squared natin dito. So we will then apply the rule for dividing fractions, which is multiplying the numerator with the reciprocal of the denominator. So ang reciprocal yung baliktad nito. So instead na 2 over 1, magiging 1/2. And then, huwag natin kalimutan yung squared. So we have 3 times 1, that will be 3. 2 times 2, that will be 4. And then, squared. So the final answer will be 9 over 16. So paano naging 9 over 16? 3 squared is 9 and 4 squared is 16. Kaya yung number that we're going to add to our quadratic equation is positive 9 over 16. So now this side is already a perfect square trinomial kasi ang 9 over 16 ay perfect square. So to simplify, we factor this side. So we have x minus the square root of 9 over 16. So ibabalik lang natin siya sa square root ng bawat isa. So square root of 9 is 3 and square root of 16 is 4. And then raised to 2 equals negative 2 plus 9 over 16. So the resulting equation will be x minus 3 over 4 squared equals negative 23 over 16. So paano siya naging negative 23 over 16? Naging 23 over 16 siya because we simplified this. And how to simplify this? We have an integer plus a fraction. So ang gagawin dyan is kukunin lang natin yung 16 as our LCD And then, we will just divide 16 to the denominator of negative 2. Now, if you ask me, wala namang denominator ang negative 2. Again, pag integer or pag whole number, pwedeng lagyan ng denominator na 1. So, 16 divided by 1, that is still 16, times negative 2, the answer is negative 32. And then, we go to the second denominator. So, we have 16 divided by 16, that is positive 1, times 9, that is still positive 9. So, you just copy na. And then, simplify the numerator. Negative 32 plus 9, that becomes negative 23 over 16. Kaya naman, yung result niyan ay negative 23 over 16. So next is to solve the resulting quadratic equation by extracting the square roots. And now, obviously, that the other side of our equation is a negative value. Kaya kung kukunin pa natin ang square root, para saan pa? Di ba alam naman natin na wala namang square root ng negative number. Kaya, we cannot proceed to step 6 and to step 7 because we have this conclusion already that the equation 2x squared minus 3x plus 4 equals 0 has no real roots or solution. So for you to try, if kaya nyo nang isolve, I have an example. So solve on your own by completing the square this equation, x squared plus 12 equals 18. You just follow the steps na binigay ko sa inyo. So yung answer dyan ay positive and negative square root of 69 plus 9 or 9 plus positive and negative square root of 69. So, itry nyo if makukuha nyo these answers. So, if makuha nyo yung answers na to, that means alam nyo na kung paano gawin ang completing the square. And that's the end of my tutorial. I hope may natutunan kayo. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell para ma-notify kayo sa mga uploads ko in the future. And don't forget to share to your classmates, your friends, and yung sa mga kakilala nyo na pwedeng matulungan yung videos na to. Thank you so much and God bless!